8 hours,
Huh.
480 minutes, 28,800 seconds.
It sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a lot, but that is the standard block of professional time that, most of us get every single day.
Right.
And if your job is one that demands high-level thinking, if you're a knowledge worker, a software professional, anyone whose output really relies on sustained creativity and intense intellectual labor, the real question is how much of that block are you actually spending on focused, high-value creation?
It's a terrifying question to actually ask yourself. I mean, genuinely, because the reality for most of us is often, what, less than 3 or 4 hours?
It's that.
If that, yeah. The rest is just, it's diffusion, it's reaction, it's interruption. We get caught in this trap where we mistake activity for output.
Oh, absolutely. The calendar is full, so you feel busy.
Exactly. You feel busy, but you're not actually moving the needle on the hardest, most necessary work.
And that is the core challenge we're tackling today. We are taking a deep dive into some truly radical, intensely focused time management disciplines. And the sources for this, they weren't written by life coaches.
No, not at all. These were forged in the crucible, really, of demanding software development environments. They outline not just, little tips for efficiency, but a complete defense strategy for your time.
A defense strategy. I like that framing.
Well, that's what it is. And our mission here is to extract the concrete and sometimes, frankly, extreme rules these professionals use to maximize that concentrated output and just minimize the waste. We're going to cover some really unconventional concepts that I think completely change the math on how you manage your day.
Okay, so we're talking about things like the high financial cost of interruptions. That idea that a 1-hour meeting might actually be burning, what, $200 to attendee?
At least. Yeah, we'll get into that math.
We're also going to unpack this deeply personal, scarce intellectual resource that the sources call focus mana.
Which is a brilliant term.
It is. And maybe most importantly, we're digging into the aggressive defense strategies, things like extreme time boxing, that allow a professional to achieve that, that flow state in a world that feels like it's designed for distraction.
It's all about moving beyond the gentle self-help stuff and adopting a foundational, almost brutal discipline to defend your attention.
Okay, so where's the starting point? How do you begin?
You start by securing the time when the world isn't competing for it.
So when you look at the source material, the central problem that keeps coming up is just constant interruptions.
It's the enemy.
It really is. It's the phone calls, the impromptu drive-by questions at your desk, the field service issues that flare up, the emails just piling up. The professional workday is chaos.
It is. And the sources are very clear on this. They state that navigating this requires, and this is a quote, pretty drastic time management disciplines. It's not about just being a little more organized.
And this is perfectly illustrated by this anecdote from 1986, which I just love. It feels so specific.
I love this anecdote, too, because it proves this isn't a new problem, The battle against distraction isn't a modern invention. It's just intensified with technology.
Right.
So this professional, he was based in Little Sandhurst, Surrey, in England, and he was managing a 15-person software development department for a company called Teradyne. And he had this realization. Managing people meant accepting that chaos was going to start reliably at 9 a.m. every morning.
So if he wanted to actually create anything, not just manage.
He had to operate outside the system. He had to find a space where that chaos couldn't touch him.
Which brings us to the 5 a.m. strategy. It sounds like self-imposed exile, but you look at the results and you can't argue with them. Why 5 a.m.? It's so extreme.
It sounds extreme, but it's pure logic. He decided that if the office chaos started at 9 a.m., he needed a solid, protected block of time before that noise began. 2.5 hours, to be exact.
So he just did the math backwards.
He just did the math. Waking at 5 a.m., riding his bicycle to the office, which is a whole other level of discipline.
It really is.
And being at his desk by 6 a.m., that action secured his block of time. This wasn't just about showing up early to get a jump on emails. This was about securing intellectual airspace when literally no one else was demanding it.
But let's be real about that for a second. That is a radical lifestyle choice. The psychological contract you have to make with yourself for that level of discipline must be immense. What's the trade-off? What did he have to sacrifice?
The trade-off is crystal clear. You sacrifice your evenings. You sacrifice the spontaneity of your social schedule.
No late nights.
No late nights. This strategy absolutely necessitates an early bedtime, probably by 9 p.m. or 10:000 p.m., and it has to be rigidly enforced. It's an admission that deep work requires a rested brain. You just can't cheat foundational biology.
So you're giving up the fun, spontaneous evening hours.
In exchange for guaranteed high-value output in the morning. And for a certain kind of highly dedicated professional, that trade-off is absolutely worth it. The feeling of accomplishing your hardest, most important task before the day even truly begins, that's a powerful, powerful motivator.
And I think it's important to stress that once he was there, in that quiet sanctuary between 6 and 9 a.m., it wasn't just him, sipping coffee and easing into the day.
Oh, not at all. This wasn't leisure time, it was execution time. The moment he arrived, the schedule for that morning block was written on a physical board.
A physical board.
Yes, and the work was ruthlessly divided into 15-minute increments. This kind of extreme time boxing ensures that even if a task is huge and complex, it's immediately attacked in these manageable, focused bursts. And those first 3 hours were completed totally uninterrupted. That built massive momentum for the rest of the day.
That 15-minute increment detail feels crucial because it prevents that mental block you get when you're staring down some huge, intimidating project.
That's it.
You're not committing to build the entire module. You're just committing to make 15 minutes of solid progress.
You've lowered the activation energy required to start. And what's interesting is this dedication to structure. It didn't just vanish at 9 a.m. when people started showing up. It shifted. It became a defensive posture.
All right, so once interruptions became possible, the strategy changed to what the sources call the 15-minute buffer.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about how that defense mechanism actually worked once the chaos started at 9.
So he knew he couldn't just ignore his management duties. That wasn't an option. So starting at 9 a.m., he would leave a 15-minute gap open at the end of every hour. So for instance, he might schedule deep work from 9:00 to 9:45.
And that last quarter of the hour.
That 9:45 to 10:00 slot was the buffer. And the purpose was purely pragmatic. It was a bucket to quickly push most of those spontaneous interruptions into. A quick question, a signature needed, a short phone call, it goes in the buffer.
So he's essentially batching the noise. He's clustering the distractions.
Precisely. And what this does is it allows him to maintain continuous 45-minute blocks of concentration time, even within that chaotic 9 to 5 environment. If an interruption happened during his deep work block, his first instinct was to ask, can this wait 15 minutes?
And most things can.
Most non-urgent things absolutely can. If they couldn't, he'd deal with it, of course. But the structure itself provided a kind of social defense. It signaled to everyone that his time was blocked and valuable.
This sounds, honestly, it sounds exhausting to maintain, especially through the afternoon. Did that rigid structure hold up all day long?
No, and this is where the sources show a really essential maturity, I think. The author specifically says he left his time after lunch entirely unscheduled.
Really?
Yeah, he just recognized that by 1:20 p.m., the day would have, and I love this phrase, broken loose. You have to transition from being proactive and scheduled to being purely reactive.
You surrender to the chaos.
You surrender, but you're still prepared. He used those rare afternoon periods where the chaos didn't intrude to just work on whatever the most important task was until it was done. It's an acceptance that, 100% adherence to a rigid structure is impossible, especially in a management role. But the goal is still the same. Prioritize the essential work during any lull, however brief it is.
Okay, so if the 5 a.m. start time is the internal solution to chaos, then the external solution has to be a ruthless, almost brutal control over meetings.
Yes.
And this is where we run into that concept that I think should be burned into the mind of every single professional. The high financial cost of just showing up.
This is the financial reality check. It underpins every other professional decision you make about time management. The sources emphasize that meetings cost approximately $200 per hour per attendee. And this isn't just a number they pull out of thin air.
Right, because people hear that and their first thought is, well, my hourly salary isn't $200. So what exactly is baked into that figure?
The sources really drill down into the comprehensive costs, which is why it's so powerful. That $200 figure, it includes your hourly salary, yes, but also all your benefits, health insurance, retirement contributions, all the associated taxes.
Fully loaded cost?
The fully loaded cost of the employee. And then, crucially, it also includes the amortization of all the overhead, the cost of the building, the rent, the utilities, the IT infrastructure, the computers, the networks, the software licenses, and the management overhead required to coordinate all of it. You're not just paying for a person, you're paying for a fully supported professional. And in high-cost tech centers, that number can easily be $200 an hour, sometimes much, much higher.
So when a six-person team sits down for what they think is just a quick hour-long weekly check-in,
The company is effectively burning $1,200 of resource time, minimum.
viewing it through that lens instantly changes the whole dynamic. It's not just a block on your calendar anymore. It becomes a major financial transaction.
It absolutely should. And professionals need to internalize this cost. Your time isn't cheap. It is the company's most expensive and often its most scarce resource. When you have high-value work to do, designing architecture, writing crucial code, solving a complex problem, that time is worth far, far more than the coordination that's happening in most of these meetings.
And this leads us to that paradox you mentioned earlier. The two truths of meetings. They are necessary.
And yet, they are huge time wasters.
How can both be true?
The paradox is essential because it highlights the subjective experience. Those two truths can describe the exact same meeting. For the sales team member, it might be invaluable for coordinating client communication, but for the senior developer in that same meeting, it might be completely redundant because the same information was already in a memo they read.
So the value is totally divergent depending on your role.
And that's why passive attendance is a professional failure. You can't just show up because you were invited.
Okay, so let's talk about declining attendance wisely. The sources are pretty blunt about this. They basically say if you're constantly bogged down by meetings, it's not the inviter's fault. It's yours.
That's a tough truth, isn't it? But it's critical for professional growth. It is not unprofessional to be invited to too many meetings. It is unprofessional not to manage your time wisely. Only you have the complete picture of your workload, your focus levels, your deadlines.
The person inviting you is just focused on their goal.
Exactly. They aren't trying to optimize your calendar. That's your job.
So what's the filter? When should a professional just say no to an invitation?
The standard is high. You should decline unless the invitation offers, and this is key, immediate and significant benefit to the high-priority job you are doing right now.
Not something that might be useful in 6 months.
No. If the meeting is just informational, if you could just read the minutes later, or if your contribution is really marginal, your personal cost-benefit analysis should always favor declining.
I can hear listeners pushing back on this, though, because in so many corporate cultures, saying no it's politically risky.
It is.
So what do the sources say about navigating that social and political minefield?
It's all about tact and leverage. First, you never just reject the invitation with a simple no. You respond with a question. You ask for the agenda, the stated goal of the meeting, and what the expected time commitment is for your specific part.
Ah, so you put the onus back on them.
You do. If they can't provide that, you have a solid professional reason to decline. You can say, I can't commit $200 of my project's time without a clear goal.
That reframes it beautifully. It's not a personal slight. It's a resource management decision.
Precisely. And if you still feel like you have to contribute, you can offer an alternative. You could say, I can't attend the full 90-minute session, but I would be happy to provide my input via an email summary beforehand, or I can just stop by for the 5 minutes you need for my specific update.
So you're demonstrating cooperation while still defending your blocks of concentration.
That's the art of it. And of course, there are exceptions. There are times you have to go. The sources list 3 key justifications. First, it genuinely interests you and you have the time. That's an investment in your own learning. Second, you can contribute a critical insight that really helps the team, outweighing the loss to your own projects. And third, the request comes from someone whose authority just outweighs your schedule, a senior architect, a senior manager. In those cases, you go, but you communicate the cost to your own manager and get aligned on priorities first.
The manager's role in all this feels crucial. They really should be your primary defender.
Absolutely. A good manager sees their team's time as the team's most valuable asset. They should be defending your decision to decline because they are ultimately responsible for the team's output. And wasted time just means missed deadlines. If your manager isn't defending your time, you're in a dysfunctional system.
Okay, let's pivot to the other scenario. You're in the meeting, you decide to go,
Yeah.
but the agenda just dies. A horrible, slow death in front of you.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. You have an obligation to manage your time, even inside that room. What is the polite but firm exit strategy?
The sources are very explicit. No rudeness. You don't just storm out or shout, this is boring.
Right.
The rule is professional intervention first. If the agenda has been hijacked, A new topic gets thrown in, or someone's pet peeve starts dominating the conversation, you politely but firmly request a return to order. You say something like, could we maybe tabulate that new topic for a separate discussion and get back to item 3 on the agenda? Our time here is limited.
And what if that request is just ignored or brushed aside?
Then you execute the polite exit.
Hmm.
You state clearly that either your goal for the meeting has been achieved or, conversely, that the discussion has deviated so far from the goal that you need to return to your high priority work.
So you'd say something like,
I appreciate the discussion, but since we've moved off the planned architecture review, I need to excuse myself to finish that critical task I allocated time for. I'll look forward to reading the minutes.
that is powerful. It's an acknowledgement that staying in a wasteful situation, given that $200 hourly cost, is actually the unprofessional act.
That's the crux of it. You are spending your employer's time and money. If the current expenditure no longer contributes significantly to a business goal, you have a professional obligation to redirect that resource somewhere more productive. Immediately.
So the strongest defense against this meeting waste is to build strict time and goal boundaries directly into the architecture of the meeting itself.
Yes, exactly. This is the whole concept behind the rigid timing you see in agile ceremonies.
Right. So if you're invited to a meeting and the host can't give you a clear agenda, defines times for each topic, and a stated goal, you just politely decline. It's like you're asking for a contract for your time.
That's the gatekeeping function. And once you agree to attend, the architecture itself should enforce the efficiency. Let's look at stand-up meetings first. They're pretty universally known now.
Sure.
But the sources stress that the physical act of standing is part of the enforcement mechanism. It keeps people just uncomfortable enough to be brief.
And the structure is brutally simple. 3 questions.
Just 3. 1, what did I do yesterday? 2, what am I going to do today? And 3, what's in my way? The purpose is strictly for synchronization and identifying immediate roadblocks. The second a discussion about a solution starts, the meeting is already failing its purpose.
But the really radical part here is the time allocation. The sources say 20 seconds per question per person. How on earth do you enforce that, especially with, say, a senior engineer who tends to elaborate?
This is where you need practical, in-the-moment enforcement. And the sources suggest something like a physical time token, a ball, a stick, whatever, that the speaker holds. Once they hit that 20-second limit, the facilitator has to cut them off.
That takes some guts.
It does, but the phrase has to be polite and agreed upon, like, thank you, that's great context, let's move to the next person. It requires a culture where everyone agrees to the rules beforehand. If you have 10 people and everyone sticks to that 1 minute per person limit, 3 questions times 20 seconds, the meeting is over in 10 minutes or less.
And if it goes to 12 or 15,
that's a failure of enforcement. That 20-second rule is the barrier that prevents the discussion from drifting into detailed problem solving. You take those conversations offline.
Okay, next up, the iteration planning meeting. This is where a team commits to the next chunk of work. The sources call this one the most difficult to master because that temptation to over-discuss is just so high.
It is. Iteration planning involves these really critical, complex steps. You're assessing the business value of backlog items, you're generating technical estimates, and you're writing or sketching out acceptance tests. If you allow detailed design discussions to happen in that meeting, you will spend half the iteration just planning. It's a huge time sink.
So how do you manage that complexity and prevent that runaway schedule?
The goal has to be rapid throughput. You proceed quickly. You discuss each candidate item briefly. The sources suggest keeping those initial discussions under 5 to 10 minutes per item. And then you select it or you reject it for this iteration.
But what if an item needs more than 10 minutes?
The moment you realize an item needs longer for clarification or design, you have to have the discipline to stop the discussion and schedule a separate, smaller meeting with only the 2 or 3 people who are actually relevant to that item.
So that's the critical distinction. Planning is for selection and commitment. Design is for a separate, dedicated time block.
Exactly, and there's a clear metric to defend against this scope creep. The iteration planning meeting should take no more than 5% of the total time in the iteration.
Okay, so for a standard 40-hour, 1-week iteration, that means
2 hours maximum. And that measurable constraint forces efficiency and forces people to do their prep work beforehand.
we see a similar rigor applied to the iteration retrospective and demo at the end of the cycle.
Yes, these are for discussing successes and failures and demoing the new working features. The key here again is the time boundary. You schedule it for 45 minutes right before quitting time on the last day of the iteration.
The looming threat of going home is a fantastic motivator for brevity.
It's a natural hard stop. And those 45 minutes are divided very specifically. No more than 20 minutes for the retrospective, what went right, what went wrong, and 25 minutes for the demo. It's about proportionality. A 1 week or 2 week iteration simply does not warrant some extensive hours-long discussion. Keep it focused, capture the lessons learned, and then release the team to start the next iteration fresh.
Let's talk about arguments. Because if meeting time is wasted, then intellectual energy is absolutely incinerated on arguments that just circle endlessly.
This brings us to a brilliant insight from Kent Beck, which is quoted in the sources. He said, "Any argument that can't be settled in 5 minutes can't be settled by arguing."
I love that.
It's so true. Technical disagreements, when there's no data, they often go into the stratosphere. They get fueled by ego or habit, not by facts. They become, as the sources say, religiously opposed.
So if arguing can't settle it, what does?
Data. The only thing to do is to stop arguing and immediately define an experiment. Build a model, run a simulation, do something to generate data. Force of personality, or who's been at the company the longest, or who has the most persuasive rhetoric. None of that should ever settle a technical disagreement. It has to be facts.
What about that behavior that undermines this sort of passive-aggressive agreement?
This is maybe the most toxic behavior that's noted in the sources. You have to be aware of the people who agree in the room, they nod along, but then they sabotage the result later through inaction or delay or side conversations.
Undermining the consensus.
Yes, and the sources call this probably the worst kind of unprofessional behavior. If you commit to a path as a team, you must engage and support it, even if you personally preferred another route. Professionalism demands supporting the team's decision.
So if an argument is absolutely necessary to settle some critical, immediate fork in the road, and you just can't wait for data, how do you apply this high-focus discipline?
You use what the sources call the focus manner rule for disagreements. You give each arguer 5 minutes, and 5 minutes only, to present their case, focusing strictly on any empirical evidence they have or the projected impact. Then the team votes.
And the whole thing is over in, what, 15 minutes?
Less than 15 minutes. The entire exchange must be settled quickly. And if data isn't immediately available, the sources suggest that even flipping a coin to choose a path is often less costly than letting an argument drag on for hours, consuming valuable time and that precious focus mana.
Focus mana. Okay, so we've established the external defenses against chaos. Now we have to shift entirely inward to explore the management of the single most valuable resource a knowledge worker has, their intense intellectual concentration.
Yes, this concept, the sources term focus mana.
I love that name. It immediately grounds the idea in something scarce and almost magical. It's a resource you can't just manufacture on demand.
It's the critical shift from time management to energy management. Focus mana is defined as that extended period of deep concentration required for complex intellectual tasks. It's like the magical substance, from tabletop games that you use to cast high-level spells.
And once it's gone?
Once it's depleted, the quality of your output just plummets. You can't cast the spells anymore.
And the sources note that for a truly skilled professional, this isn't just some cute metaphor. It actually feels physical.
The author describes being able to physically feel the presence of focus mana, and more importantly, its absence. This physical connection grounds this abstract concept in the reality of things like cognitive load and decision fatigue. Mana is basically your reservoir of executive function. It's that mental capacity to hold complex variables in your short-term memory and make high-quality decisions.
And when the mana is flowing, that's when you enter the flow state.
That's it. So the professional imperative becomes ruthlessly organizing your entire day around maximizing these high-focus mana periods.
But what causes it to decay and just vanish?
It's rapidly consumed by two primary forces. First, there's internal decay. Focus mana is a decaying resource. If you don't use it, you lose it. You can't hoard it for days on end.
Right.
And second, external factors rapidly consume it. We already talked about meetings. They are mana black holes. They just suck up intellectual energy even if you're just sitting there passively listening.
And it's not just work-related stress either, right? Personal worry seems to be a major drain.
Oh, a massive consumer of cognitive load. A fight with your spouse, a fender dent in the parking lot, an unpaid bill you're thinking about, or even just anticipating a difficult conversation later in the day. These things create a background process in your brain that consumes intellectual bandwidth.
They suck the focus mana out of you.
That's the quote. They just divert your attention from the high-priority, complex variables you need to hold in your head to do deep work.
Let's talk about the critical consequence of ignoring this depletion, of trying to write code or do high-level analysis when your mana is gone. The sources warn this leads to a massive hidden cost.
This is the hidden professional hazard. If you spend all your focus mana in meetings and worrying, you have nothing left for true creative output. You can still sit at your keyboard, you can still type, you can still produce something.
But it's what the sources call zero mana code.
Zero mana code. It will be riddled with logic errors, design flaws, poor implementations, things that will absolutely require you to rewrite it later.
So you might spend 5 hours pushing through a task, feeling productive, only to realize that the quality is so low that it's going to take you 2 days of rework just to fix it.
That is the exact cost calculation that professionals have to make. The sources state that it is far better to stop immediately, recognize the mana is gone, and take 30 or 60 minutes to just defocus and start recharging.
Than to waste days or weeks fixing what you built.
Fixing the rotting mess that you created during a period of depleted cognitive load, pushing through when the mana is gone is a direct contributor to the technical debt and the swamps we're going to talk about later.
Okay, so since focus mana is so scarce and so easily depleted, the strategies for actively refilling that reservoir are absolutely paramount. This is where personal discipline really intersects with professional performance.
And it starts with the most fundamental biological requirement there is: sleep. It is not an optional luxury. The sources are clear. It is a professional prerequisite.
There's a specific claim in the sources. 7 hours of sleep often gives the developer a full 8 hours worth of focus mana in the morning. Is there a biological reason behind that specific ratio?
Well, the sources touch on the idea that it's about consistent quality sleep, which maximizes the time you spend in deep restorative cycles. When a professional adheres to a 7-hour minimum, they're consistently hitting the necessary REM and deep NREM stages that consolidate memory and, clear metabolic waste from the brain.
And if you're operating on 6 hours or less,
You enter a focus deficit that is almost impossible to recover from during the day. Consistent management of your sleep schedule ensures that resource is topped up every single morning. It is the nightly reset button for your cognitive load.
then there's caffeine, the tool of choice for many, many knowledge workers, but it comes with a really strong caveat in the sources.
Yes, caffeine can certainly make the use of your existing focus mana more efficient. It increases alertness, it delays fatigue, but the caution is essential. Too much caffeine causes this strange jitter.
It doesn't create new mana.
No, it just overloads the system.
Yeah.
It can lead to what the sources call hyper-focusing on all the wrong things. You might become intensely focused on, perfectly formatting a comment block or optimizing a tiny piece of code that doesn't even matter, instead of tackling the high-value architectural problem that's waiting for you.
The recommendation is very measured, almost ritualistic. A single strong cup of coffee early in the day, and then maybe a Diet Coke with lunch. That's it. It speaks to a very disciplined management of the drug.
It's about moderation to enhance, not desperation to create. The goal is a steady supply of alertness without inducing the anxiety or the jitters that lead to that kind of unproductive focus.
So if your mana is depleted midday and more caffeine isn't the answer, the prescribed solution is active defocusing. This seems so counterintuitive to the drive for maximum output.
Defocusing is crucial for recharging. Focus mana is partially recharged by intentionally stepping away and letting that intense intellectual machinery just idle down for a bit.
So what did that look like?
These are low-stakes activities, things that engage your senses without demanding complex decision-making. A good walk, a light conversation with colleagues about non-work topics, or literally just looking out a window for a few minutes.
I think the idea of listening to a podcast about astronomy or politics is a great specific suggestion for this. You're engaged, but you're not mentally invested in your immediate work problems.
Exactly. You are consuming creative input that doesn't demand any output from you. You're distracting the problem-solving centers of your brain, which allows them to rest and reorganize. This also includes a power nap or reading a magazine, anything that is completely divorced from the current workload.
But the truly novel concept in the sources here is what they call muscle focus, using physical activity that still requires concentration to recharge your mental capacity.
This is the recharge multiplier. It's a fascinating idea. Activities like martial arts, tai chi, yoga, or cycling, they require significant focus, but it's a completely different kind of focus.
It's not intellectual.
No, it's muscle focus. It's spatial awareness. It's physical coordination, not intellectual analysis. And this physical discipline seems to somehow increase your total capacity for mental focus over time.
The author specifically mentions bike riding for an hour or two, covering 20 to 30 miles, often with music or a podcast. How does that physical effort actually translate to intellectual gain?
The theory is that it channels your energy in a totally non-intellectual way. The rhythmic nature of cycling, for example, allows your mind to wander in the background while your body is executing the task. And this dual function seems to restore the intellectual reservoir, not just for a moment, but systemically. A regular regimen of muscle focus actually increases your ability to sustain that high-level mental focus when you get back to your desk.
And finally, there's this need for creative input. The idea that writing software is a creative act, so you can't just be an empty vessel.
Right. The sources really stress that to be most creative during your high-output phase coding, designing the professional has to expose themselves to creative input. And this isn't just news or technical blogs, this is imaginative work.
Like what?
The author explicitly cites reading lots of science fiction, finding that the creativity, the problem-solving, the world-building of those authors actually stimulates their own creative juices for software development. It's about feeding the machine with high-quality, inspiring fuel.
Okay, so we've secured the mana through sleep and recharging. Now we need the concrete tactical defense mechanism to actually deploy it without it getting drained.
This is where the Pomodoro technique comes in. But we need to discuss its implementation with an aggressive focus on defense, not just the basic definition.
Right. I think most professionals have heard the concept. The 25-minute timer, one tomato, followed by a short break. But you're saying the true power lies in its aggressive defense against any and all interruptions.
Exactly. The basic mechanism is dead simple. A standard kitchen timer set for 25 minutes. But the rule for defending that time has to be sacrosanct. This technique is only effective if you treat that timer like a physical, non-negotiable boundary.
So let's talk about the critical rule. The phone rings, or a colleague shows up at your desk in the open plan office. How do you defend the tomato?
You answer, or you acknowledge them, but you immediately and politely ask if you can call them back within 25 minutes. You're not rejecting them, you are time-boxing them.
And that provides a clean, justifiable boundary.
It does. The person understands that you're engaged in a scheduled block of focus work, and you've given them a specific time when you will return your attention to them.
But what if the interruption is genuinely urgent, a production issue, a critical system error?
Regardless of urgency, the rule is you stop the timer immediately. You deal with the interruption, but you do not try to multitask or juggle the interruption while the timer is still running.
So the timer only runs during pure focus time.
Pure focus time. Once the interruption is dealt with, you can restart the timer. The fundamental rule is that the interruption cannot interrupt the flow of the tomato. And just as important, if the timer dings, you stop what you're doing immediately. Even if you're mid-sentence, you take your scheduled 5-minute break.
That requires tremendous discipline, especially stopping mid-flow when the timer dings. Why is stopping immediately so crucial?
It trains your brain. It reinforces the boundary. It ensures that the 25-minute block is always treated as the maximum focus period, which helps prevent cognitive fatigue. That 5-minute break allows you to reset and prepare for the next focused interval. And after every 4 tomatoes, you take a longer 30-minute break.
So this provides a very clear delineation between two types of time.
Yes. Tomato time is dedicated, sacred time for getting real high-value work done. Non-tomato time is what's allotted for processing distractions, for non-critical communication, for meetings, for breaks. This clearly separates your productive time from your reactive time, which is absolutely essential for managing your focus mana.
And this leads to a measurable output metric, tomato velocity.
This is how productivity gets measured under this system. On a really good day, a professional might get 12 or even 14 tomatoes done. That's 6 or 7 hours of pure concentrated work.
That's incredibly high output rate.
It's huge. And professionals can track their weekly tomato velocity to estimate their future productivity and also to identify dips that might be caused by poor sleep or too many meetings. It gives you a non-subjective way to quantify your true output.
I think the most important takeaway here for our listener is recognizing that the Pomodoro technique isn't just a cutesy time management tool. It's an aggressive defense mechanism that establishes a predictable, non-negotiable block where your intellectual mana can be deployed without risk of it decaying from constant interruptions.
It is the mechanism that allows for the attainment of that coveted flow state. If you are constantly available, flow state is impossible. The Pomodoro technique provides that 25-minute sanctuary. And by adhering to the rules, especially the interruption rule, you maximize the use of your most precious resource.
Okay, so we've discussed defense and energy management. Now we have to shift to the internal traps, the mental and technical pitfalls that can sabotage long-term productivity and focus, even when your time is perfectly managed.
These are the hidden enemies of the knowledge professional, and the sources begin with a discussion of professional integrity, the trap of avoidance, and something called priority inversion.
The sources describe priority inversion as basically lying to yourself. How does this self-deception actually manifest in a professional environment?
It starts really subtly. You postpone a task because it's scary or uncomfortable or just boring. And this avoidance forces the priority inversion, where you convince yourself that a less important task is suddenly much more urgent.
Like you might spend 2 hours perfectly organizing your email inbox.
Exactly. When the truly high priority task is tackling that complex, daunting design review that you've been putting off, you're lying to yourself to protect yourself from the difficulty or the potential failure that's associated with a real priority.
It's self-deception disguised as efficiency.
That's a perfect way to put it. You're creating a professional justification to protect your emotional comfort. The professional behavior standard, according to the sources, requires a kind of ruthlessness with yourself. Evaluate your priorities, disregard your personal fears and desires, and execute your tasks strictly in priority order, no matter how unpleasant or difficult they are.
Let's move to the technical traps, starting with what the sources call blind alleys. These seem like an almost unavoidable part of experimental or creative work.
They are. Blind alleys are technical paths that simply lead nowhere. They are a fact of life for software craftsmen. They happen because of flawed assumptions or unforeseen technical incompatibilities. They stop you cold and they force a complete restart.
So the key isn't avoiding them, because you can't, but recognizing them quickly and having the courage to back out.
This is what the sources call the rule of holes. When you find yourself in one, stop digging.
Stop digging.
The longer you wander down that blind alley, the more intellectual capital and, frankly, ego you have staked on that solution, which makes it exponentially harder to abandon. Prudence and experience can help you avoid the obvious ones, but the true skill is the speed and the courage with which you recognize the dead end and reverse course, even if it means throwing away weeks of work.
Can you give us a concrete, relatable example of a blind alley?
A classic one might be trying to integrate some bleeding-edge, community-developed library into your core application because it seems cool, and then realizing after 2 weeks of integration work that its underlying dependencies fundamentally conflict with your company's established enterprise security requirements.
So you just have to stop.
You stop, you scrap the library, and you look for a more stable, albeit less flashy solution. That's backing out of a blind alley.
Now let's discuss the more dangerous technical traps. The marshes, the bogs, and the swamps. The sources say these are actually worse than blind alleys. Why is that?
Because a blind alley stops you. It forces you to turn around. A swamp is insidious. It slows you down, but it doesn't stop you. It just impedes your progress, requiring what the sources call sheer brute force to move forward. And it drains vast amounts of your focus mana and your time.
So these are things like poor code, bad design choices, poorly integrated legacy code.
Yes. It technically works, but every single modification you try to make takes 10 times longer than it should. Swamps, therefore, have this profound, long-lasting negative effect on productivity. They can ruin teams and even companies over time.
So a mess is worse than a blind alley because you can always see a path forward, but that path is just torture.
It's torturous, and the sources describe the progression very clearly. A solution starts out simple, but then complexity grows, requirements shift, and eventually the professional has this sinking realization that a wrong design choice was made way back at the beginning, and it's trapped the system in this bog.
And that moment, that realization, is the critical choice, the inflection point.
That is the moment of truth. You have two choices. You can go back and fix the original design, which is expensive rework. It costs time, it costs ego. Or you can continue forward, just pushing with brute force through the bog, driving the entire system deeper into a permanent swamp.
And the sources are definitive on this point.
Going back is never easier than it is right now. Delaying the fix guarantees a higher cost and increased complexity later. Every day you wait, the swamp gets deeper.
And continuing forward through a swamp, knowing it's a swamp, is described as the ultimate priority inversion.
It is the worst kind of professional failure because it involves conscious deception. You're lying to yourself by justifying the extra time it's taking, and you're lying to your team, your company, and your customers by telling them you're making fast progress toward a goal when you are, in fact, sinking deeper and deeper into technical debt. Professionals have to fear these messes more than anything else and commit to cleaning them up immediately upon recognition, regardless of the short-term cost.
Wow. So this deep dive has been a really powerful journey. From the external architecture of time defense managing those $200 meetings and ruthlessly time boxing your output, all the way to the internal resource economics of Focus Mana and these ethical battles against self-deception.
The synthesis, I think, is pretty clear. If you are a knowledge professional, you have to be diligent in managing both your external time and your internal focus. That means understanding the decay of focus mana, utilizing things like muscle focus for recharging, and knowing precisely why you are saying no to 3 out of every 4 meeting invitations you get.
It requires fighting that temptation of priority inversion, that very human urge to work on the comfortable low-priority tasks instead of the hard, essential ones, and never, ever becoming so vested in a solution that you can't abandon it when the data proves it's a blind alley or, even worse, a swamp.
That ability to halt progress to fix a problem is the hallmark of professional maturity. The systems we build, the schedules we keep, and the code we write are only as strong as our commitment to integrity and to quality. And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener.
If you were to conduct a rigorous, honest analysis of your own focus mana usage over the last single week, how many of your hours were spent fighting the chaos of interruptions, and how many were spent fruitlessly slogging through a self-imposed, ever-deepening technical bog instead of executing true priority work?
Your answer to that question really defines your professional trajectory. The dedication to this kind of extreme discipline is the difference between maximum output and wasting vast amounts of the company's and your own most precious resource.